Hello, all of you. Today, I'm going to read a section from my new book, The Vacuum Principle. It's out and it's available on Amazon. So, this book is all about how to find market gaps and create category defining companies. So, I've used a metaphor called vacuum uh, for market gaps. So, I have a lot of frameworks and mental models to identify market gaps, very, very specific frameworks for you to use it, practically apply it. So, what I'm going to do is today I'm going to read a section called How to Identify Market Gaps, a systematic approach to identifying market gaps. So, in this section, right, I talk about the anatomy of industry blindness, right? If you're an entrepreneur or a marketing strategist or a CEO, the way to identify a market gap is to take a step back and see the prevailing industry practices. And why I call this as the anatomy of industry blindness is the established players in an industry usually are too entrenched, right? They have this insider bias because of which they fail to see new trends, new business model. So that's why I've named it as the anatomy of industry blindness. So in this, I'm going to talk about three components today. One is the business model, right? It's all about what I'm trying to tell in this segment is your own success becomes a prison, right? So when you're an outsider, if you want to disrupt the industry, if you want to find new products or services, or find new business models, just take a step back, right? Even you could be an innovator, or even you have an existing business. Don't worry about that. You just take a step back and see this blindness, right? See the successful practices in the business. So I'm going to read this for you, right? Industry blind spots do not emerge from incompetence, but rather from the very success that traps companies within their existing paradigms. Consider the case of Kodak, familiar example, right? The pioneer of digital photography. Despite inventing the revolutionary digital camera, Kodak struggled to embrace the very technology it had created. Their blindness was not due to a lack of foresight. Instead, their constraints were structural, woven into the fabric of their business model, organizational capabilities, and industry relationships. This is what I mean by industry blind spot, right? Kodak is a very famous example. So in this, as I've told you earlier, I'm going to talk about one specific aspect which you can see as an outsider, that is business model constraints, right? I'm reading this now again. Often, the deepest blind spots stem from successful business models that become invisible prisons, right? As I've told you, I'm going to give some examples. You will be able to understand the successful business practices which you see, right, in an established industry. Because it is successful, people tend to replicate it. So they don't try to innovate, take a step back and innovate. This is a common universal practice, right? Universal behavior. So here is an example. When Amazon disrupted the book retail industry, traditional bookstores were not simply resisting change. They were shackled by their own success formula. The investments in prime real estate locations, long-term lease commitments, staff training infrastructure, and inventory display requirements were not just costs, but structural limitations that prevented these established players, traditional bookstores, physical bookstores, right, these established players from envisioning, let alone pursuing the digital opportunities that lay before them. Right? When Amazon entered into online retail store, uh, they first entered into the retail bookstore, right? Online bookstore, right? That's the one category they entered into. All the existing physical bookstores, they were established in their own existing business model. That's what I meant, business model constraints, right? They were blind to this new internet thing, and they got entrenched into this existing business model, right? But Amazon saw this as an opportunity. A similar dynamic played out in the taxi industry, right, where traditional companies were constrained by their existing system, the high fixed asset costs, regulated pricing structures, geographic service limitations, vehicle maintenance requirements, and driver management systems all created blind spots about the potential for innovative technology driven urban transportation solutions, right? So this is the business model constraint. So when you look into an industry, these are somewhat some older examples, but even now when you look at an industry, if you look at the prevailing practice of an industry and the business model which all the companies adopt, you'll be able to step back and invent something new, right? Since all these companies were deeply invested in some infrastructure and existing process and systems, another fallacy plays out, right? It's called sunken cost fallacy. Since you have invested so heavily on something, you don't want to kill that process or kill your own idea, right? This opens up new business models and a lot of product or service innovations, right? And the second aspect or the second element in the anatomy of industry blindness, right? First one we have covered, business model constraint. The second one, which I spoke about in the book, is organizational capabilities. Beyond the confines of business models, capability constraints, the things organizations literally cannot do due to a lack of necessary skills, systems, or culture, also contribute to industry blindness. I know this is concept heavy, but these are real world examples, right? Before I write this book, I almost spent 6 months to 1 year time in studying the existing innovations in the market. So I came out with all these concepts. When the disruptive home sharing platform Airbnb emerged, traditional hotel chains were not merely ignoring the sharing economy trend. They lacked the technical capabilities from peer-to-peer platforms to digital transaction systems, as well as the cultural mindset to participate effectively in this new market dynamic, right? So when Airbnb came out, all the existing hotels, right, they were established in their own business models, and they also lacked organizational capabilities. When you want to innovate or some new disruptive innovation, you have to build a culture, right, based on your new business model. Your existing companies, if you're grown to a certain extent, you're deeply entrenched in the culture, process, systems, and everything. You lack the critical organizational capabilities to innovate, right? Most of the hotel companies, they had this physical business model, their staff structure, their asset heavy model. So all these things became an impediment for them to launch something like Airbnb, right? Airbnb is an asset-light company, and it's totally a different culture, right? I mean, it's a sharing. They invented something called sharing, where you can even go ahead and live an absolute stranger, right? It's totally against conventional um, culture where we go and stay in a hotel, right? These are some of the cultural aspects you need when you innovate, when you introduce a disruptive product or service, right? So for entrepreneurs, usually when I advise entrepreneurs and CXOs, when they want to bring out with something disruptive, new innovation, I always advise them to create a new startup like organization rather than uh, using the existing established business model, organizational capabilities, culture, and even people. Even your people, if you're running an established organization, everyone is chasing short term, even long term revenue in that particular industry. So the mindset of people, even the culture, process, systems are aligned towards that. You can expect some incremental innovation in what you do, but to do breakthrough innovation, it's practically impossible to use the same business model, people, culture, systems, and process, right? That's why usually best entrepreneurs, they form a totally a different small startup like team to enter and to test, experiment new markets.